Hello, welcome back to Why Your Life Really Matters, the podbook. And one of the reasons I think your life really matters is it doesn't end with death. And I've discussed people's near-death experiences when they've been brain dead, but recalled the whole of their lives. Like nothing's been lost. Sounds amazing. But how could it be true? Because the assumption is memories are stored in the brain. They're neurological connections. Well, if the brain is dead, how can people recall their lives? If memories are like information stored on the hard disk of the brain. So in this chapter, I want to claim that that's just wrong. And that we are mistaken to think that remembering, learning, which is remembering, needs a brain and a nervous system. It doesn't. And to present a different understanding of what's happening with memory. And I want to start by just establishing for sure that for a system to recall the past does not require it to have a brain. And a great example of that is slime molds, which are amoeba-like single-celled organisms. They don't have a brain, they have no neurons. And in experiments, they've been offered the opportunity to get to oatmeal, which is food, but they have to cross a gelatine bridge with a bitter chemical on it that they don't like. And that what will happen is that these simple single-celled organisms will learn that it's okay. Even though they don't like the bitter chemical, they will learn, and so that eventually they'll just cross the bridge, no problem. And even more interestingly, you can put them into an enforced sleep for a year. And when you wake them, those slime molds that have experienced that, learnt that, will go, yep, forget the chemical, cross the bridge. Those that have not, they'll be much, much, much more wary. Take them much longer to get to the point where they cross the bridge to the oatmeal. They've done experiments with slime molds where they've reduced the temperature every half an hour. And slime molds, when it gets cold, they move slower to retain energy. And they found that after some time, the slime mold starts to reduce their speed before the cold, because they know it's coming. They've learnt, oh yeah, this is when it gets cold. So that means they're remembering and they are able to monitor time. Isn't that extraordinary? I've got a quote here from Audrey Dussator, who works with slime molds, who says, "This result means that there is such a thing as primitive cognition, a form of cognition that is not restricted to organisms with brains." Not just animals, even simple ones, plants. There's a plant called the Mimosa pudica, which is from South America, Central America, and they've done experiments where they've dropped the plant on a regular timescale. And when you drop the plant, it registers that and it pulls all its leaves in. It's one of the characteristics of the plant. But what they found is that if they did it regularly, the plant learned that it was not a problem. They didn't need to do that. So it stopped. So a plant that hadn't learned it, a plant that had learned it, nothing. Even when they took long, long breaks, a month or more. When they came back, plant that had learned it, was fine. Now here's another quote which I liked from Paco Calvo, who's the director of the Minimal Intelligence Laboratory at the University of Murcia in Spain, and the author of a book called Planta Sapiens, about plant intelligence. And he says, plants have to plan ahead to achieve goals, and to do so, they need to integrate vast pools of data, they need to engage with their surroundings adaptively and proactively, and they need to think about the future. Now, great quote, I think. I'm not suggesting, and I don't think the author is either, that we anthropomorphisize plants or slime molds. They're not thinking like we're thinking. They're not remembering like we remember. But that these things that we experience are already there in a more primitive form. These organisms are also doing all of this processing. And they're doing it, they're detecting patterns in their experience now based on the recall of patterns in the past. And that's what I mean by passivity. Patterns have been set down in the past, and then they're used to discern and govern the processing in the present. And we're doing it on a very, very emergent level. And it's not to do with the brain. There's a paper I came across, it's from 2013, which is called Flatworms Recall Familiar Environs Even After Losing Their Heads. Now, they've got very simple brains, very, very simple. They learn things, but you can cut their heads off and they will regrow. Well, they've lost their head. It's gone. But it will regrow and they will still remember what they knew before. And then we can go right the way through to things I've discussed already, like human beings with hydrocephalus. Very little brain. Most people can't function with that, but some have degrees in mathematics. Terminal lucidity. Somebody whose brain is so damaged that they can't recall who they are, they can't recall their loved ones, and yet just before they die, they recall everything. They're just like they used to be. How's that? And near-death experiences we've already discussed, actually brain dead and coming back going, I remember the whole of my life. So what I'm suggesting is, look, there's something inherent in the nature of the universe that it is learning. That's the idea of passivity. Bertrand Russell, the great philosopher, 100 years ago, I have a quote from him here, which I like. Inanimate matter, to some slight extent, shows analogous behavior to memory. Now, obviously, we're not talking about conscious memory here, like we experience it. We're talking about the patterns laid down in the past are being referenced by the system, even on a very, very physical, primitive level. They are governing what it does now. And that means the way matter is forming and reacting is about the patterns laid down, but it's also about how the plant is able to process its environment based on the patterns it's learnt in the past, or the flatworm, or the slime mold, all of it, everything, actually, everything is in that sense, not in an anthropomorphic sense, not like us, but but where what we experience has come from, everything is learning and processing. Everything is referencing the past because that's what it is. That's what I'm suggesting. Everything is a system, everything is a process. It's made of its past. The universe is made of its past. It exists. I think of the analogy might be to think of the universe like an iceberg, where the present is like the tip, and then there's this huge thing you don't see, which is the past, which is everything that has formed, which is informing the present. And all the systems are doing that. And what we're experiencing as conscious memory is us consciously accessing the past, that passivity, so that our conscious memory is us in the present actually being conscious of the past information. And I've suggested in the discussion of how psyche evolved that is how psyche evolved, that the earlier biological system, which had learnt to take in all this information and then process what really mattered in high definition, make it conscious, could take that focus and now make conscious the processing that had been always going on, always. But now it could focus in on it. So it's focusing in on the passivity algorithms, the past, how it's discerning, how it's processing. And the first way that is most likely to have emerged is as the experience of memory, which is why what you experience in memory very often is an image of what you experienced at the time. It's just one of the ways you experience memory. We'll get onto that in a minute. But that's what I'm suggesting. That's going to create the imaginal realm. So memory is not a vague leftover in the past, leftover of the past, few neurons that connected, most of it got lost. It's actually something we're perceiving now. We are sensing, in this case, psi sensing, the infoverse, our own past. And we're experiencing it now. We're re-ideating it. We are taking ideas in the present to discern the past, which is why often we distort it, because it's not a remnant of what actually happened. We are actually returning to something now, which means we can look at the past and it reveals things we missed at the time. I'm an old man and I'm doing that with my past all the time. Oh, now it looks different because I now have more wisdom, I hope, to understand it, and I missed it at the time. But it can also distort it because you're sensing and making sense, or in this case, psi sensing and making sense of things according to your present narratives, and that can distort your understanding of the past to fit with your present agendas. We often see people remember things very differently sometime afterwards to suit their present life narratives. And you can also see that's why we do experience the past as visual or audio images, but often it's more like an internal monologue. We're telling the story to ourselves when we recall it. Okay, why does this matter? And it really, really does, I think. Because I'm saying, look, memories aren't things that exist in the brain that can be lost. In fact, I'm saying that no information is ever lost. Everything that's formed is formed. As that, it's formed. And what we're doing now is accessing it. And that's happening on the biological level with the neurological system, which is a complex system to process on that level. But particularly it's happening on the ideational level. And so that when you have something like dementia, you're not losing your memories. You're not losing the past. What's happening is the system, which is psychobiological, so they're working together, those two levels, is losing its ability to access the information. All the information's still there. The person with dementia is exactly the same process that they've always been. They just can't access that right now, which is why when the system's disengaged, this changes. Terminal lucidity, you see the system's disengaged, it's just before death. They can access it again. When it completely disengages, they can really access it in the near-death experience. And there's the whole of their life. Nothing has been lost. Nothing has been forgotten. Everything is there. Now, there's some people who can remember everything now. They have that particular ability to really psi-sense, savants, with hyperthymesia. I mentioned it before. And they experience the past as real and emotionally intense now. But what's so interesting is that brain scans reveal no anatomical difference between them and people who remember bits. And also very interesting, in experiments where people are led into false memory, they can easily be convinced they experienced something they didn't experience, and they're absolutely sure they did. People, savants with hyperthymesia, are just as prone to these false memories as a control group. And what you can see with that is that they are people who have a particular, there's not very many of them, about 60 I think we know of, who have a particular ability to psi-sense in that particular way, just like psychics can psi-sense in that particular way. And there's many other people exploring spirituality who have particular psi-sensing abilities. But they're still doing the same thing as the rest of us. They are approaching the past from the present, which means they can be misled. That's what we're all doing. All right. What have I been saying, and why does it matter? Well, I've been saying memory is experiencing the past by re-ideating it now. It's not stored in the brain. The brain is part of the biological processing system. The ideational network is the part of the processing system. The past is the patterns that govern how everything works, which we're referring to all the time to discern what's happening now. You're doing it as you hear these funny noises I make. They make sense to you because of your past, because you remember. You remember what that sound signifies, and you can process it. But what is happening when you remember is that you are referencing your own self, which is your past. You're referencing your passivity. That's what you are. You are that process of accumulating information, evolving. So what this means is, it means your life isn't disappearing. It isn't like, oh, I've got a few strands left and then I'll forget that and it'll all be gone. And then everyone will forget you. And no, I don't think it is like that. Your life isn't disappearing, it's accumulating. And although you can't access everything about it now, maybe not much, you can access more and more and more of it, it seems, as you evolve your ability to psi sense, but especially when the body dies. And there it all is. So, memories are not stored in the brain. Every system is the past, it's made of its past, and that is being referenced all the time with every system to govern what happens in the present. Biological systems have learnt to do that consciously, e.g. to process that in high definition, and that is what we experience as memory. That is limited by how well we can do it, how we function as psychobiological organisms. If that is damaged, like with dementia and other terrible diseases, then we can't do it. But once we're detached from the part of the system that's not working, then we can do it. And that's what's reported back to us by all this large number of people who've had near-death experiences. It's why terminal lucidity happens. And it's why odd things like their hydrocephalus means that people can still remember, because it's not in the brain. And what's happening is the system has adapted to still be able to psi-sense the past and learn. Not everyone. Some systems don't manage to adapt, they can't. Other systems adapt, they can. That's what I'm suggesting. And I think this has a big impact on why your life really matters. And I hope you can see that and feel that. So, I'm reminded once again of one of my heroes, Socrates, who asked all the difficult questions, who once said, people fear that death is forgetting, but death is remembering. And what I am attempting to explore with you right now is how that can be true. In the next chapter, I want to invite you to come back with me to a very primal level of this emergent reality that we're experiencing. One that is before matter, before space. The level that is studied by quantum physics. And I want to explore 4 big ideas that were very influential on me in the creation of the new philosophy that I've been sharing with you in this pop book.